y'all, it's time.
Come on, let's go. Let's do it.
Rolling on the road
With the doc,
rolling on the road,
with Dave,
rolling on the road.
with the doc.
100 states of the possibility with Dave and Dr. Bertie.
All right. That was cool. Yeah. Hey, let's go. That was nice.
Good afternoon, and we are rolling live in Washington, D.C. virtually. Yes, like this. We're so excited. We want to say thank you so much for tuning in. Today is Wednesday, February 21st. And if you are watching us on GRTV, thank you so much for tuning in and watching the replay. Our guest today, I am so honored. I'm about to fall over in my chair. You know, I only got a few folks that I consider, you know, that I'm a fangirl of. And this one is one in particular. This is Dr. Donna Walton, who is the CEO and founder of Divas with Disabilities. And it's actually an acronym. And I'll let her give you what that acronym stands for. But right now, we're talking about 56 years since Dr. King was in Washington. Isn't that awesome that we're in Washington on today, that he stood there on the monument and gave this particular speech? Doretha?
I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Thank you. Do we still have a dream?
Do we still have a dream? Is that what you're asking me?
Do we have the same dream?
Well, do I have Dr. King's dream? I mean, my aspiration is absolutely inspired by Dr. King's powerful speech, which, by the way, was in 1963.
Mm-hmm. How old were you?
So I was, in 1963, I was 7 years old.
Wow.
So that's 61 years, actually, from today. From 2024 to today, when he gave that speech, that's 61 years ago. And when I think about that speech, and I was only 7, then I have to think about where I am today. And so I think about, I was born in turbulent times. I mean, in fact, it's a great way to start off. What does a dream mean to me? And where do I see myself in that dream as a Black woman? And I just want to back up too for my blind sisters and brothers to sort of describing myself. So I am a Black woman. I have curly hair, wearing some black little glasses. I have on a kente cloth inspired top and some wonderful, I think, earrings that have the face of an African mask. So when I think about the aspect of Dr. Dream's speech, I think about this piece in my book that I wrote, that I was born on April 24th, 1957 in Washington, D.C. And at the time, the nation, when I was born, was divided by race. And guess where I was? I was on the side with the least opportunity. Although the greatest divisions were in the Deep South, the city of my birth, the nation's capital, was not immune. Dwight D. Eisenhower, believe it or not, was the president. And he would be followed by John F. Kennedy, who would be assassinated, and then, of course, Lyndon Baines Johnson. So my birth was just about 3 years after the United States Supreme Court handed down its unanimous decision on Brown versus the Board of Education on May 17th, 1954. Declaring state laws that establish separate public schools for whites and blacks are unconstitutional. Separate educational facilities are inherently equal, the court declared. Still, while the ruling technically outlawed segregation, enforcing it was a different matter. In the year that I was born, which is 1957, Governor Orville Fabus of Arkansas attempted to block Black students from entering Little Rock Central High School. And in 1963, when I was 6, so actually I was 6 and not 7, Governor George Wallace of Alabama stood at the doorway at the University of Alabama's Foster Auditorium to prevent 2 Black students from enrolling. Keep the context. 1963, King gave his speech. We're in 2024. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, he defiantly declared. The governor would not step aside until forced to do so by the Alabama National Guard under orders from President Kennedy. In the struggle to stay truly and end segregation and gain equal rights for Blacks, there were sit-ins by Blacks and their allies at white-only lunch counters. And if you can see, I have this background that I deliberately, or intentionally, I should say, have as my background, because this was a very symbolic sit-in. So these sit-ins by Blacks and their allies and whites at only white lunch counters, freedom rides and marches, riots, and en masse jailings of civil rights proponents, and even lynchings of Blacks. So now we're in 1955. 14-year-old Emmett Till was brutally murdered in Mississippi for speaking to a white woman in a store. On September 15th, 1963, the Ku Klux Klan members blew up a church in Birmingham, Alabama, killing 4 young Black girls and injuring 22 other people. Several Black civil rights leaders were assassinated. Medgar Evers in 1963, Malcolm X in 1965, and Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, all shot down in the prime of their lives. Now, why did I read this context to kind of introduce? Because you asked me a question. You asked me a question about the dream. My dream has been, I would say, shattered from the time that Dr. King gave that dream. It's fragmented. My dream still I still have a dream. I still have hope. I will never give up hope that our society will not be so uh, fragmented and discriminated and downtrodden. I have a dream, absolutely, and I still hold these truths to be self evident, as King did, that one day we will not have to be judged by the content of our color, but by who we are. So, my dream, I still hold, but again, it's it's like pieces of a dream because it's been fractured. Our society today has a long way to go. We've made some strides, absolutely, but the type of the pieces of the dream that King was talking about, the structural pieces, we still are working on those. We are still working on those.
Dave, your thoughts?
Well, first, thanks for your patience on my tardiness. But my thoughts are, Dr. Walton, it definitely resonates that we are in this place of, bordering on, if not really, the violent fragmentation. That it's like, what, what, why do people want to do this? Again, because of the color of your skin. That the threats of violence and the real violence, that it's like it just does not compute. Why do we go back to this? Back to, George Wallace is being
Resurrected. Resurrected, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people are saying he's a champion. We need to have segregation in this whole bizarre upside down world of, we can't have any consideration of race. And it's like, no, this is repairing damage. And as we say in the disability world, this is not a hand up. This is leveling the playing field, or this is not something for nothing. And it's this just weird resentments. Like, no, this is, again, they're not getting ahead. We're leveling the playing field, and people just, it's so easy to, unfortunately, hate sells so dang easy. And so that's, I too live in hope, and that message of hope resonates. The hard part of, wow, how can we still be here and we feel like we're going, instead of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it's 1 step forward, 3 steps back.
Well, fear has a very much of a grip, right? Fear is extremely paralyzing. Why we are going backwards is because of the fear that we're moving to forward. Because again, there's been some strides. There have been strides, but for every stride there's this settle of fear that overcomes, and then those strides become, they become threatened. And then you mentioned something else, Dave, in terms of, the why, and that is the hate, and that has to be taught. And until that can be untaught, if you will, we're going to continually go backwards. Children who are being born today are being born with a clean slate, so to speak. They have a clean palate. So where do they get to hate? Adults, unfortunately, we have a lot of accountability because hate can only be taught. And you would think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr.
It's now a quarter after the hour. We want to say thank you so much for tuning in. If you are watching on GRTV, today is Wednesday, February 21st, and our guest, we are virtually rolling to Washington, D.C., and it is Dr. Donna Walton. I am Dr. Kimberly Barrington. I am a Black woman who is bald and is adorned in all purple. And we have Dr. Pastor Dave, who is here with us, who is a white male wearing glasses, and his pretty hair is growing back. If you know him, he normally has a long ponytail down his back, and he always donates it every year. And Dr. Donna is a Black woman with beautiful curly hair. She's wearing glasses and a kente pattern top. So we want to say thank you so much for tuning in. Both of you said some made great points as far as the fear, where we've come, and what the three of us have to bring in is the intersectionality of disability with this. Because when we talk about the dream and what that means and the fear, now you have to add in that someone may have a neurological disability and may not understand what's happening. And so all they have learned is hate and anger, and don't maybe necessarily know how to process, their feelings to know anything any differently. Or you have someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, or a blind person, or someone who's in a wheelchair. And now, how do I access my rights? And realizing a dream that not only am I being judged by the content of my color, but now I'm being judged by the content of my ability.
Absolutely.
So now,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So now we've compounded it, but we want to say thank you so much to our usual suspects that are tuning in all the way from Maryland. We have Shayna. Good afternoon. We have Vertaji tuning in from Detroit, Michigan, and D. Coates is tuned in from Detroit, Michigan. And there were a couple other people I think I missed. Okay, there we go. There was a young man that tuned in, but I think your name already passed me. But I want you to know I saw you, that you came on. Thank you so much. So, as I was stating, as we're talking about have we overcome, have we realized a dream, and we're talking about the fear and the violence, we have to add in, that intersectionality of disability. And I love the fact that this is just a prefix, so it is not the entire word. And when we remove it, then if I am disrespected somewhere, I can remove that dis and I can become respected. If I am disadvantaged, I can remove the dis and become advantage. And so if we really look at it, all of us have some sort of dis where it keeps us from realizing the dream.
Mm-hmm.
So does it really keep us from realizing the dream, or is it a barrier towards reaching the dream? Because
it can be both.
Yeah. Because I think, and I only asked that question because I'm thinking about myself, of course, and being a Black disabled woman, how I never really give up on the dream. Disability being a part of my life is just that. It's my lived experience. My Blackness has always sort of trumped my disability, if you will, because that's what shows up. That's what shows up first, and that's where I've experienced most. I acquired my disability at 18 years old, so I experienced what I really experienced, and that I now experience living with a disability. And that is discrimination, and prejudice, and being marginalized, not being good enough. So I've experienced all of that. I guess I could say I was toughened before my disability, right? Because I had that lived experience of being denied because of, right? So my disability really just if anything, compounded the issue, compounded, how I move through life. But
for me, because your disability can be hidden, if you will, so they encounter your color first. Whereas now, before I acquired my disability at 47, so up to 47, I was always judged first by my color. Now, since I've been in the wheelchair, I am addressed first by my disability versus my color.
Interesting, because your
It's
chair is the
been
first thing they
reversed.
see. Are you saying that they see your chair now?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. And my disability, yeah, I somewhat walk this dual, I guess, reality in a sense, in that yes, I'm an amputee, and I do wear a prosthetic leg, which somewhat can be perceived, by some who don't really know me. If I just walk into a room and they don't see me walking with a cane or a limp, they could probably assume you're right that there's nothing going on there.
Mhm.
So I can definitely relate to that, and I guess it's almost like just like triple jeopardy in a sense. Like it's like, well, okay, I've experienced being discriminated against and sort of being denied opportunities because of my race, and I never know which one of them are operating when I leave a room, right, or when I show up in the world. Is it because I'm discriminated because of my race, my gender, or my disability? And that's the insidious thing about intersectionality for me, living with a disability, because I never know which one is operating. I never know which one is operating
Right.
against me.
So, Dave, you made an interesting point last week when we interviewed you, when we talked about the symphony and how, in order to attract Black talent, they started putting up this a screen. So all you heard was the talent. You didn't know what color, what gender, what ability was on the other side. So you were only judged by what your talent was. How successful was that?
It continues to have great success. Again, that the number of people of color that are hired by symphonies to be in paid positions, and so yeah, I mean, as it proved that there was the bias that watching a European American play the violin and watching an African American play the violin, you're just hearing the European American as playing better, but you put them behind a screen and it's like, no, number two is better. And it's like, oh my gosh, that was the African American. Where, again, we put these biases there. Um, one time I would, a Caribbean I don't know how the right way to say that, Afro-Caribbean presenter on diversity. He said, he's talking and he goes, but my own biases, because I got on an airplane and there was a white woman and a Black guy as captain, co-pilot, whoever was in the first chair. But he's like, oh my gosh, where are my white guys? Because I need white guys driving this plane. And it was was a Black guy. And he thought, oh my gosh, if I don't see two white guys driving the plane, I want to get off it. And he told it as a joke, though, but it was true. His own biases about just the color of the skin, who has the capacity to drive this airplane. And we all know they don't throw you the keys to the airplane until you know how to drive it. It's fly it. And so it's just this, we see and we judge.
Well, we judge, and yes, you see what you see, but you also, that's being fed by false narratives.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And storytelling. I mean, that's why it's so important for Black folk to tell their stories, and Black people with disabilities in particular tell the stories, because all you know is what you know and what you see and what you hear, right? And so if you're constantly getting these negative stereotypes and false, stories, if you will, or the same stories, right? Like sad and sorrowful and, oh Lord, help me. That's you absolutely, you're gonna get on the plane and say, oh, wow, I'm out of here, because all I know is what I know and what I perceive to be not qualified.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shonda, for your comment. It says, yes, these three, gender, sex, and disability. We want to say thank you to Jessica Strand, Kia Bryant, Pastor Leroy Tava, and Doretha for coming back on and tuning in. Now, Pastor Tolbert, I think, is a really good person to speak to how, we are perceived, especially with when you're talking about it was a Black pastor who was able to motivate people across all sex, all genders, all cultures, when he got people together and to march on Washington before he got that speech. And we have the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance that I think in our present day that really helped to continue to realize the dream as a whole by moving through the Black churches, by uniting them. And he was the president at one point, and I just appreciated what he did because normally they have services together. They hadn't had services in a long time. He was able to get them to come together and have a large service and really find some issues within the city that they could take on, like education and housing. And so do you think that our pastors have taken kind of a back seat now from where Dr. King was, him being a pastor, and galvanizing all of the churches together? Do you think that our pastors have stopped doing that?
So is that question directed to Dave
Either
or
one,
myself?
either one of you.
Churches have always been the mainstays and examples of what love is supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that standpoint, I can't speak on all churches. I can only speak on the experiences of what I've seen in the Black community where I reside and where I've had most of my lived experiences. And you're speaking about integrating like congregations, or are you talking about integrating?
Because I'm talking about, we're talking about Dr. King was a Black Baptist minister who was going from church to church, preaching his message. And that's how he was able to go from the church out into the community and have folks come alongside, do the marches, show up at Washington when he got ready to do the speech. And I'm saying, have our pastors within our communities, have they start pulling us together in that sense to say, we still need to fight for this dream?
I really can't speak on that because I can only speak on from the pastor from which I serve. And so I would say that, certainly in terms of community outreach, I mean, he's definitely on top of that. I really could not really address that any further than that, though, because.
What are your thoughts, Dave? Well, especially with doing the Black and brown lunches and then pulling the churches in.
Well, I mean, I too will speak from my experience, and I'll be a little bit more judgmental, at least within white pastors. There are a few that are working on justice issues, but at least within my chosen faith or denomination, Roman Catholic, a lot have the next generation of priests aren't as socially active. I mean, there were pictures of priests walking with Dr. King and getting arrested with Dr. King and supporting Dr. King. And, there might be some, again, I'm going to risk being judgmental. There might be some decent lip service, but are they really working on it? Because what we talked about last week and a couple of weeks ago, that the I Have a Dream speech was not the reason why people went to DC. Right. The reason why they went to DC, and that's what I was looking up here.
Right.
So I could quote them, the demands.
That's correct.
The dream would be realized. Justice would be realized if we have comprehensive and effective civil rights legislation.
Correct.
With access to all public accommodations, decent housing, adequate and integrated education, and the right to vote. withhold federal funds from programs that discriminate, desegregate all schools in 1963, and then it goes on a minimum wage of $2 an hour as a minimum wage. And
Right.
so those demands are the vehicles to realize the dream. And so if you just have a dream, that a phrase I like is, dreams without action is fantasy, and action without dreams or without a vision is just, sound and fury. And so you need to have the dream and the action. And so again, my harsh critique, at least within the Roman Catholic Church, and especially the Roman Catholic Church in America, the American bishops in the 80s had a pastoral letter on the economy and said the economy's broken and it's too many people are being left out. They had a pastoral letter on peace and justice and said nuclear weapons are bad and we got to get rid of them. They've had pastoral letters on racism in America and within the Catholic Church. And now the bishops are all worried about, is President Biden worthy enough to receive Holy Communion?
Right.
And so that's my harsh critique against the Roman Catholic Church. And that's not to say every, because I do know there's a lot of great people working, especially down on the border. There are bishops speaking out against the really bad efforts to mess up immigration and hold undocumented people, like arrest them and throw them out of the country, where these people just want to work and we have jobs. And so anyways, it's not everybody, but at the same time, overall, that sense of justice and really working for that dream of justice, which is in Hebrew scripture is right relationship. Do we have right relationships with each other? And I'm just saying we have less white pastors working on it than used to.
And that's, I'm glad you put that in context, Dave, because in terms of social justice movement and activism among parishioners, among pastors and ministers, I don't see that. I don't see that. So I agree with you. I don't see that aggressive, if you will, really sort of timely. Maybe it is. It's only timely. It's only when something happens is there a response to. I think George Floyd, was an awakening for everyone who was even minutely concerned with social justice. So I still speak from my own lived experience and who I see. I have a very active pastor, Howard John Wesley, Alpha Street Baptist.
Shout out, plug for the
Shout
church.
out, shameless
Exactly.
plug.
Yeah, I see the activism. The beautiful thing about, I think, his actual teachings, if you will, is that he does have both the theological and the scholarship, historical scholarship of Black history interwoven into understanding, how we move and move in love, of course, and take care of one another. If more pastors, if you will, ministers, parishes, churches would be involved, would the dream be actualized any faster, right? Would we move any further? Because like you said, Dave, we're talking more about these structural issues that are not in place, right? That more so than just not treating someone nicely.
Let's get Shayna's comment. Let's get her comment in real quick, because there's another one.
Oh, where she said, not all, but I think. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Not all, but I don't think a lot of pastors have went down Dr. King's path.
And then she says, Dr. Walton.
I agree, Dr. Walton. Not all pastors have the same fight or dream like Dr. King. And there's a a movement called the Poor People's Campaign, and that's why I quick looked it up. That Bishop William Barber,
Yep.
who's leading that, and his story, he has a disability.
He does.
And he had that disability when he went into or tried to get in seminary, and people were trying to keep him out of seminary because of his disability. And he said, no, I can pastor. And he's been an awesome force on the national and local levels for justice.
Absolutely.
And he continues to work for it, where he is a person that is picking up that mantle, keeps bringing demands. I mean, there's a big event on March 2 across the country that it's a day of nationally coordinated simultaneous direct action in 31 state capitals about low-wage workers. And what are we doing to support low-wage workers? By increasing their wages, and so there are pastors out there. Again, don't get my initial harsh judgment wrong or take it wrong. There's just continued more room for improvement. It'll be interesting to see how many Catholic pastors go to one of these 31 state capitals that they're gathering people to on March 2. There might be a handful. I mean, the guys, and because I'm Roman Catholic, they're all guys. The guys are retired that were most active, like in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Again, especially in the Roman Church, we had a movement called Liberation Theology, which unfortunately got too close to communism, which then John Paul II, the Pope, put a kibosh on it for the wrong reasons. It's like, it's one thing to critique, it's another thing to eliminate because of some of the people who they have resonance with. And that's bad politics, because it's trying to keep some of the powerful people in power, and we could go on and on about people like Archbishop Oscar Romero from El Salvador, who was gunned down by the military while saying mass. And yikes, because he had the audacity to speak truth to power.
Right.
As Frederick Douglass said, we got to speak truth to power. And that's the only way power ever is going to change, is make demands to power. So anyways, if you've never seen the demands of the March on Washington, Googleize the 10 demands of the March on Washington to realize that, again, what was said 60 years ago, we're still far. In fact, the Voting Rights Act has been defanged by the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, there's just like, oh, everything's okay. We don't have to check in on these states anymore. Really? State after state continues to put in laws, which they say is about voter integrity, but it's all about, we have to protect the vote from people doing fraud. And the only examples of fraud, and this is not a statement of advocacy, but a statement of fact, the only examples of fraud from the 2020 election were people who fraudulently voted Republican for Donald Trump. There was no documented case of voter fraud of somebody voting for a Democratic candidate. There's allegations of tens of thousands of votes that were fraudulently. So we have to put in these harsh restrictions so people don't cheat in voting, which again isn't happening. But if you say it enough times, do people start believing the lie? And of course, to the south of us in Ohio, the stories of, a suburban voting, a polling center is going to have 20, 30 voting machines, no wait. And the inner city one has like 2 voting machines and there's a 4-hour wait. What's wrong with this picture? Oh, that's not discriminatory, Dave. That's just how it happens.
Well, that's because you got to change the rules. I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, for every step that we take forward, there's got to be something to get you back, right? So you got redlining. I mean, you just name it. You for everything that can happen positively to move Black folk forward. There's always something to try to take you couple of steps backwards. And that's why it's so important, I think, to know our strength and our power. And Martin Luther King Jr., I mean, he has incredible quotes and movements. And one of the quotes that just always resonates with me, and it talks about, he says, our most nettlesome task is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power. Okay. And so, I mean, that one, and that was just a piece of what he was talking about, because he was talking about the fact that you had to do this because so that government cannot elude our demands, right? So that you won't be distracted. You got to stay strong. You got to stay powerful, so that government can't, elude what you're looking for, what you're seeking.
And the amount of practice and preparation, because again, your background, Dr. Walton, of the lunch counter boycotts and sit-ins, people practiced that, and people prepared themselves for the absolute violence that they encountered. People think that Rosa Parks just got tired and said, "No, I'm not going to move." She practiced. There was, again, because you had to be prepared for the absolute violence that you were going to face. Back to Governor Wallace, sending out the fire hoses and the dogs, and you, again, people had to be as ready as they could be for that, and to know how are we going to support each other when we're sitting at the lunch counter and they all come in and start pounding on us? It's like, okay, let's hold our, and just all of that stuff.
Right.
It's practice and holding your power, supporting each other. It just wasn't a willy-nilly, oh, there's a lunch counter, let's go. It was intentional actions to call out the wrong that occurred.
Right. And keeping their eyes on the prize.
Station identification. It is now 4:42, and you are watching Rolling on the Road live. We want to say thank you for tuning in. If you are watching on GRTV, it is Wednesday, February 21st, and we have virtually rolled to Washington, D.C., and our guest is Dr. Donna Walton. We want to say thank you to Miss Jerling Betts Garnett, who is watching. Thank you. We have Miss Pure Beauty. And we want to say thank you. And this says, this is a really great discussion. Absolutely. That's what we're here for, to talk about shine a light on the intersectionality of disability within all of our communities, based off of, guess who this is, guys?
Jada Love.
Yes, a guest from Atlanta, Georgia. When I was rolling for real. Thank you so much for tuning in. She was a guest that we had on when I rolled to Atlanta back in November. And she has the school bus that is a boutique. She was in the parking lot of Walmart. So shameless plug, you guys find her. And she has some wonderful clothing. I think she is definitely one that we can say has realized, part of that American dream, that she has a young daughter that she has on that bus with her, and they can pull up in a parking lot without being harassed or harangued. And you can just come up, you can get stylized, if you will. And it was women of all colors, all nationalities, as I sat from afar and watched them come and go. And I've watched her as time has gone on. When The Color Purple just came out, the new version, if you will, almost 40 years later, and to see that scene again with Sophia with her children and Miss Millie, for her to say, oh, your kids are so neat and so clean, you want to be my maid. And now we can say, sure, but this is how much it cost. The flip side of that that sure, I can be your maid, but guess what? I have a business now that does that type of service. And so I think in that respect, the the growth, the change, the realization, of part of that dream that here it is, you can be a single mother and clean houses without being indentured to someone. You can get an actual check. D said, yes, it was awesome.
David D. Checking in from the D.
Yes. So I think we have to look at things like that. When you look at the movie and you say, okay, on this end, she was going to be an indentured servant. But now today, she can charge for her services and still be able to say yes or no, and she won't get jailed for it. Now, can't say she might not get harangued, but she can make that decision. But I also like the powerfulness of, Thiele opening up, taking a feed store and turning it into a pant store. I think it's phenomenal. So to show in a late period there, before we get into all of the civil rights, that a Black woman is empowered. She's checking a few boxes there.
And something I saw recently, and I didn't check further to when it was filmed, but the actor Tom Hanks was like, he did I don't know, was on Instagram or whatever, and he was just expressing his amazement that on the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa, I don't know how to label it other than the destruction of Black Wall Street in Tulsa,
right?
Where there were all these Black businesses and they were thriving. And again, it was a segregated community, but Black folks were like, hey, we're going to support each other. And they were doing awesome. And for some really bad excuses, no good reasons, basically a mob of white people came through and killed a lot of folks and burned down the Black part of Tulsa. And Tom Hanks was like, how did I not know this? 100 years after, like, now that we have the 100th anniversary, he's like, how come I'm just learning this now? That in American history, this was not, and the myths, fears, stereotypes, we say that about disability, we say that about Black folks because the image that, Black people are just lazy. Black people are just lazy. Here was a thriving economic hub of, as you said, Dr. Kimberly, men and women opening businesses, running business, supporting each other, great community, burnt to the ground by a mob of white people because they said, well, we can't let this happen. It's like, America, really? The land of the home and the brave and the free? That's the roots. Because Dr. King, he knew people who survived that. I mean, that from 1922, 23 to 1963 was a closer amount of time than 1963 to today. And so knowing that piece, and it's, just America, what we have done to people of color, and what we've done to what now, as I like to say, 100 years ago, they didn't want us Polish people on Team White, but they want us on Team White now because they need more numbers. And so the segregation or discrimination against Eastern Europeans and Southern Europeans pales in comparison, again, to discrimination against Hispanic Americans and Black Americans, Native Americans. It's like, America, and some people say we're a Christian nation.
Right.
I don't know which. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's sobering about what you just said is that you sort of spoken in past tense in a sense, and we're still in present tense. I mean, those things are still happening. They are happening in different ways. They look differently, but they're the same, the same narrative. I mean, it's the same narrative, and that's what makes sort of the idea of the dream so painful. to look back on, because, like you mentioned, it's more the structural things, employment, wages, it's just, housing, you know, you just healthcare. I mean, you name all these things. I mean, every aspect of life is affected, and a lot of progress was made, but has just been turned back. It's always been a struggle. I mean, it's always a fight. But it's something that's never going to end, because of what you talked about. Black folks just have resilience. I mean, we do have resilience, and we continue. People with disabilities included. I mean, when I speak of Black people, I'm pretty much including. I'm speaking for people with disabilities as well.
Well, and it's interesting. And Shayna says, yes, nothing has changed. Still goes on today, but in a different way.
Right.
Yeah, a lot more subtle. Gotten slick in our discrimination, but it was, when you talk about slavery, one of the first things a lot of white people say is, well, the African tribes would capture their enemies and they'd sell them. But it's like, yeah, but the white people were buying them and carting them across the ocean, because they wouldn't have captured them and sold them unless you were buying them. And then,
Right.
and then another friend recently said this to me, because, people will critique the Black community that he said, people say it's like a bucket of crabs that, Shayna, you'll get this because you're there in Chesapeake Bay, that a bucket of crabs, it's like once a Black person's doing well and getting to the edge of the bucket, everybody's pulling them down. And my friend said, but we never asked the question, how come they're all in the bucket? How come African Americans have such limited opportunities? Back to, we're not looking to give people something for nothing. We're just leveling the playing field. And so we got to get people out of the bucket, and maybe they won't be tearing each other down. And again, white people do it to each other too, but we, crab in the barrel. There we go. Shayna's got it. Yeah, how are we? As much as we can, we have to support each other. And if we're tearing each other down, then we got to call those people to account and say, why are you doing that? What's the purpose in that? Because as people say, haters got to hate in the white community now. I don't know if you've ever heard of, oh my goodness, why am I blanking on her name? The whole world knows her. She was at the Super Bowl and everybody was looking at her, loving her. She's on the great tour.
Oh, Taylor Swift.
And people are trying to tear her down.
Why are you bringing her up? I mean, Dave, really? You giving Taylor Swift airtime today?
Sorry. I'm just using it as an
You
example.
did that?
There's people who try to tear her down, and so people are always hating.
These are definitely false equivalencies right now. I think, Dave, I'm gonna have to say, Dave, we can't.
Absolutely. Okay. It's a stretch. I'll give you that.
That was a major stretch. Dave.
Major stretch.
Yeah, you took it.
I'll
took
take
it
the
out there.
penalty.
Okay, I'm a step here. Got to save my brother. Got to save.
Save him, Dr. Kimberly.
Got to save him. But I do. I have to say, I appreciate your sentiment and I appreciate your heart. I really do, because it was coming from a very good place. Dee said, oh my.
I like Shayna said, flag on the play, Mr. Dave. So thank you for calling me out, Dr. Walton. Thank you.
I'm just sitting here like,
all in love.
No, and that's why I take it, because I know it was given in love.
So we've had these conversations, but this is how we learn to be in a safe space like this, to be able to have the conversation. And I appreciate you wanting to understand and wanting to find something to compare it to so that you can process it in your mind to be able to do something different. So that's how I take that. And I hope that, the audience takes it the same way, because truly we have realized, what did she say? Shayna said, yes.
All in love. This is a great conversation.
But this is how we get past those points to breaking down systemic thinking and being and doing. And it is my hopes, we're still emailing back and forth with our government here. And I had one thing, and they came and said, well, can we say A, B, C, and D? And I said, yep. Well, let's do it this way. So we're still kind of going back and forth on what the narrative is going to be with our government. Did I say that? Yeah, I think I said that right, correctly. For them to weigh on and weigh in on what they believe they've done systemically to make some of these different changes. When we talk about those 10 demands that they had going to Washington, them, how do I want to put this without, spilling the beans, depending on which way it goes. But we definitely are in discussion for them to come on board and to say, have they met? I can't wait. Let's go down those 10 demands that they had when they went on Washington. How far has your state gone? How far have your elected officials gone to say, we're going to help realize those dreams, because we're going to look at those 10 things and make sure that if we have the power, and this has always been, my stickler, and Dave knows I will go toe to toe. He's seen me go toe to toe, that if you have the ability and the power to change something systemically and you don't, then to me, you're powerless and you don't need to be in that position. You just don't. Then we need to find somebody and vote for someone, as you were talking about, all of this voting and regions and all of that, we got to get the folks that aren't afraid. And Dee says,
conversations are key to critical thinking.
absolutely.
Being willing to be called out by a brother or sister.
Mm-hmm. A sister from another mister and a brother from another mother, regardless of nationality. But however, it is now 4:57, and we probably could go on, and we can, if you would like to, because our live audience is still here participating. But however, I would like to say thank you so much to those of you who have watched on GRTV. If you would like to see this interview in its entirety, please go over to YouTube TV, and it's at 100 Shades of Diversibilities, and it will be segment number 5, 56 years have we realized Dr. King's dream. So I want to say thank you to those of you who have tuned in on GRTV. And we will see those folks on next week. And again, you can watch the entire interview in its entirety on YouTube at 100 Shades of Diversibility. So now we can finish the conversation. So how do we, and as my alarm goes off from my arm, how do we individually, collectively, through the vehicles that we're in, you have Divas with Disabilities, please give them the name for that acronym.
Okay, so actually the acronym is for DIVA. Well, first of all, it's a Divas with Disabilities Project, nonprofit organization aimed at amplifying the images and representation of Black and Brown women with physical disabilities. We do a lot of promoting and marketing, if you will, divas to mass media spaces, because there's been so much exclusion and almost erasure of us in these spaces. DIVA is a backronym for Dynamic, Illuminating, Victorious, Achieving Sisters. And we came up with that because we wanted to show that diva and disability could coexist in a single person. We also wanted to show that we also wanted to show that if a woman who happened to live with a disability wanted to show up as a diva, she absolutely should be able to do so. It's an empowering word. We see it as a very empowering word. And each word, and the sister, of course, means the sisterhood. It means the togetherness and the community of who we are. And so that's sort of the background about Where Divas. And it was born in 2012, basically from my story. I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a bone cancer, when I was 18 years old, and I had the aspirations of becoming an actress, a singer, a dancer. You couldn't tell me I wasn't going to do any one of those things. I was going to be in Hollywood, and my dreams were, I would say, deferred, if you will, because of this cancer. But I never really gave up on the dream, and so fast forward, saw that there was a community of other women who had aspirations to be in Hollywood, if you will, or to be performers. And so the Divas with Disabilities Project was created for that community to be able to have a space, a safe space, to be able to coalesce around these ideas and topics of being a performer. And we've we've partnered with, I should say, casting agencies and producers and directors who are looking for talent to play authentic roles of disability. And that's where we have Divas comes in. And I've been somewhat a great example of sort of actualizing my dreams, not giving up on them, because I was cast in two series, one a web series, and another one was a TV show.
Shameless plug. You can see
Yes,
it on Hulu.
I should say that. So
It's
I
on
was
Hulu.
cast in the other black. I keep thinking about that. I really should toot the horn on that because it was really, it was really significant. In
Episode
that,
9.
I'm
There's
sorry.
only 10 episodes. I
Yes,
said there were 10
episode
episodes to
9.
it.
Yes,
And it was
episode
episode
9,
9.
2 scenes. I was cast as a black disabled woman. And I was not served as, but I was to play the role of a mother for one of the main characters. And like I said, very, very significant because it showed that, first and foremost, that Black women do exist. If we happen to exist with a disability, then we show up in the way that we are. And I happen to be a wheelchair user in this particular role. And as a person with a disability, just over the moon to play the role because I was cast authentically. And that meant a lot. That meant a lot. There's several. There was one before we go because I don't really want to lose my thought on this. But we've been talking about so many things, and I think one of the things Dave talked about was in terms of how do we sort of get through these challenges, or what are some of these roadblocks and stumbling blocks that are always kind of put up as soon as we try to go one step, with 2 steps backwards. And so James Baldwin has an incredible quote that I like to think about. And that is, nothing or not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. Mm-hmm. And I think that's as Black folk, that's who we are. Black folks with disabilities, that's who we are. We're constantly faced with those challenges, and we face them head on. We really do.
Amen.
Thank you to Mr. McDonald who is tuning in. Thank you so much. That's a good word and a great quote. And we definitely thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And this was definitely a riveting conversation. We traveled to a lot of great places within the conversation.
We did.
And we made it back home safely, unscathed, and still in love.
I like that.
Even more so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The dream continues, right? I mean, I think the dream lives on. The work is never done. It is just never done. I think when you can speak up, do that. Whether you be a pastor or just a civil servant. You know, if you have an opportunity to speak up and speak out, then we should all do that.
We should. We definitely should. Dave, any final thoughts?
I'm simply going to say amen.
Yeah, I agree. I think I said it just a few moments ago. This has definitely been some riveting conversation, and I appreciate the fact that it all ended in love. And we're only going to put a comma because we're going to continue the conversation on tomorrow. And we definitely, I appreciate your lived experience, Dr. Donna. I thank you for your honesty and your transparency and your call to action and responsibility that you always pose to us. And for lack of a better way to put it, but you always play the devil's advocate. You know, you don't always see just the plain black and white, but you say, you know, there's shades of black, there's shades of white, and then we haven't even gotten to the gray part yet.
Right.
And so
Mm-hmm.
challenge our thinking. You continue to have us do the critical thinking and go beyond our thoughts, our feelings, and what the norm should be or what it could be. But let's not pretend that we're going outside of the box. How about we get rid of the box completely
Absolutely.
and let's build something together. So I'm grateful to continue to build something together with all of you. We're here in Michigan and you're there in DC.
Yep.
And then we're going to move from there together and take all of that down to Florida in
Okay.
October. So I am just excited, even to the idea of us even trying to do something here as it relates to continue the conversation and what responsibilities do we have as an individual. And I would challenge all of our viewers to make it your responsibility to be a change. You know, be the one to influence those around you. Have the courage and the personal bravery to say, I'm going to stand out. And when you do that, know that all of us are here standing with you and you are not alone. You know how to reach out to us. You know where we are on 7 different platforms. And we are so accessible. And when you're ready to take that stand to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be one to carry the torch and to help realize, you know, this dream or perpetuate it, because we need perpetuators, we need sustainers, we need some fighters, we need some challengers, and we need some moderators, and then we need those who are going to hold us accountable. There are so many different areas in which you can find yourself on this continuous journey. So I do challenge you, as we have just 3 more shows to go, that you find yourself somewhere on this journey. And with that, we put a comma and we'll see you.
And so we say, and don't forget, if you're interested, a shameless plug again, get a copy of my book. If you want to learn more about, I guess, the principles of life living, if you will, staying on this social justice, you know, path. I talk about those in my book, The Shattered Dreams and Broken Pieces. And so I want to close on this quote, though, by Audre Lorde. And she said that if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. So I think that.
So y'all think about that until we come back on
Absolutely.
tomorrow.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone.